Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another On the Agenda webinar organized by the European Liberal Forum. We're very, very happy that you are able to join us on this very fine June afternoon. And we're very, very happy to be able to host our distinguished speakers for today's topic, which is EU-U.S. relations, what's next in trade and tech. Now, as all of you know, or maybe some of you know, President Biden came to Brussels for the first time as President of the United States last week. And during all the talks and the EU-U.S. summit, the parties established a high-level European-U.S. Trade and Technology Council. And we're going to look a bit into that today. So I really don't want to keep our distinguished speakers and our amazing moderator Beatrice waiting. Thank you very much for joining us. We're very happy to have you. And if you miss anything, or if you want to listen again to what our speakers will say, you will be able to find this recording on the ELF website and the ELF YouTube channel. So without further ado, I will welcome Beatrice, the moderator of today's webinar, and all our speakers. Thank you very much again, Lesha, Alejandro, Giovanni. Thank you for joining us. Beatrice, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andre. You know, it's always a pleasure to be here with you. And indeed, as you may know, the arrival of President Joe Biden to the White House has brought a lot of impetus to the relationships between the US and the EU, and particularly on trade. We have seen a lot of development in that area and a lot of push to try to overcome the differences in many areas of the relationship of the both of them. And we saw in the past some advancement, in particular on the tech area. Today we're going to be talking about that, all the opportunities and all the challenges ahead. And we have indeed an amazing lineup of speakers bringing both from the policymaking area, but also the businesses. So I don't want to take up more of your time. I really want to hear from them and want to start this conversation. But before that, I want to remind you that we want this to be as inclusive and engaging as possible. So if you have questions for our speakers, make sure that you leave them on the Q&A chat. I will bring them into the debate and make sure that your voice is heard too. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker, who is Liesje Eskim-Meinke. You know, I always try. She's a member of the European Parliament from the Renew Europe group. Please, Liesje, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. And you got it almost right. So great job. And thank you for having me today to be speaking on this important topic. I'm so happy that when we are talking now about EU-U.S. relations, and I'm on the trade committee, so I usually speak about trade relations, that we can finally not only speak about Airbus, Boeing, about steel tariffs, but that we can really look forward into what positive steps we can take and more towards a more positive agenda. And I think that the technologies, innovations is really one of the key issues where we can really work together with the US, because, well, as you know, the bilateral relationships between the EU and the US is the world's biggest trade and investment relationship, worth over 1 trillion euros per year. And together we account for about a third of the world's trade and standards. So these numbers mean something. And they underline the potential impact that we can have when we work together. And not just on our own territories, but also when done effectively, we can really use our influence and leverage beyond the EU and the US. And the global challenges of rival system of digital governments that we face make strengthening transatlantic cooperation in the field of trade and technology evident and urgent. And I therefore very much welcome the announcement of the establishment of the Trade and Tech Council during the EU-U.S. summit on June 15th. And within a broader context of our transatlantic relationship, this means that we are moving away from mostly discussing the disputes that I mentioned and towards finding solutions and new areas for cooperation. And that also can mutually beneficial, and in particular in areas of strategic interest. So on the digital economy, over 60% of the global GDP is digital or arrives from it. Also, physical sectors depend on it. And we should really try to find joint solutions through this new council. And we need international data flows to continue digital trade, in which I have a great interest, because these have come under great pressure recently and should be one of the priorities of the agenda of the Trade and Tech Council. And I believe that we should really aim to create legal certainty also for businesses, while also, of course, being a liberal, continuing to protect the privacy of our citizens on both sides of the Atlantic. And I will closely follow the developments on artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, because together we can really lead by setting standards. And well, after all, I don't need to tell you this, the digital market is a global market, and we can drive and influence discussions in international, multilateral fora by looking for a common approach on these matters. And we need to ensure that new rules in this field respect our values, are human-centered, and that products are interoperable with each other. And there's also a topic that has not been frequently discussed that I want to raise today in the context of the Trade and Tech Council, because, well, clearly trade is much more interwoven with security than ever before. And we also see this reflected in the Trade and Tech Council. For instance, we see the establishment of working group on export controls, preventing the misuse of technology and investment screening. And I've worked on this the previous year on the dual use regulation. And I really think that this is a topic where we can really work together with the US. And maybe the Commission, Alejandro from the Commission, will be able to get into more detail about the objectives of these working groups, as there's not much known of the details right now. And from my side, I hope that these working groups can also coordinate more on dual use items and the export of those, so that we can prevent that new technologies such as cyber surveillance fall into the wrong hands and are used against human rights or against our own security. And well, we recently approved the revision of the dual use regulation where I worked on, and it would be good that if we can try to align more with each other as well. To get together, I do think that we could be more effective. And I also hope that we can coordinate more to prevent potentially hostile foreign investments in strategic sectors, such as telecommunications, while we all know the 5G discussions. And by forming a democratic bloc, we can cooperate more on investment screening in such strategic areas and avoid that state-owned enterprises from certain countries acquire critical infrastructure and technologies here. So, well, having said all this, of course, time will tell how many deliverables will follow, but I know certainly that we in the European Parliament are very active on this, and I know the Commission is as well. And, of course, disagreements will arise, but at least we made a significant first step to improve cooperation on trade and technology. And now we have to look into next steps to find common approaches and to achieve concrete results, because that's why me as an MEP am here for my constituents, the concrete results. So what we have to do best to remove technical barriers to trade and investment in areas such as AI and other emerging technologies, and stimulate cutting-edge research so that our companies and also our startups will be able to benefit more from our trade relationship. And furthermore, we should coordinate and align ourselves vis-a-vis other partners that promote divergent models, which I just discussed. And in this sense, we should really promote democratic values online globally. And we should try to discuss our differences on privacy, data flows, or platform legislation to avoid regulatory confusion on both sides of the Atlantic. So overall, I think that the Trade and Tech Council should not only improve our bilateral trade and investment relationship, it should also contribute to our industrial and technological leadership and improve our competitiveness, increase our leverage in multilateral fora, and ultimately promote our common strategic interests as transatlantic partners in the global arena. So thank you. I look forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you so much. I think you definitely paint a very nice picture of all the different challenges that can be addressed through this council, but also all the questions that arise about this cooperation, the role of the European Union, this strategic autonomy we've been talking about for so long. And I very much appreciated the question of standards versus values, because we know that this is a fundamental issue for the European Union. We've been trying to apply those issues to AI, to data sharing. So this is definitely a challenge that needs to be addressed, but it's a global issue, knows no borders. But we definitely need to push for global legislation, for global regulation on this matter to provide certainty as well. And I'm sure that our next speaker has a lot to say about this indeed. So I would like to give the floor straight away to Alejandro Caínzas, who is a member of the cabinet in charge of security and cybersecurity, external relations and digital, and the group of the external coordination on 5G, and the cabinet of Commissioner Vestager.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. I'm also in the category of difficult last names, but you have some advantages. We're from the same country, so that was good. It's easy to follow Lisa because she described so well what this is really about. We, as you know, came out with this proposal for the first time in December of last year, very shortly after the election results were finally known in the United States. And it was a proposal which was not made in a vacuum, but it was really part of this joint communication that we produced, which tried to set a renewed transatlantic relationship after 4 years, were 4 very difficult years in which both the US and the EU changed. So it's not about going back to what we had in the past, but about trying to build something new, something more balanced and stable, and also a relationship where Europe takes more responsibility on its side of things. So I think that's where the Trade and Technology Council really fits. And our objective was to set up a forum, a structured forum, which will allow us to discuss how to set the rules of the road for the digital economy, to seek convergence in our policies, and to boost innovation and competitiveness in both sides of the Atlantic. All of this really anchored in our common democratic values. It took a little bit of time to get it going since December. Obviously, the US administration also took some time to get running, but we're very happy that last week at the summit we were finally able to launch it, and I would say in a quite ambitious way, as you have seen. So there will be a political level, the Trade and Technology Council itself, where on the EU side it would be co-chaired by my boss, Executive Vice President Vestager, and Executive Vice President Dombrovskis, and there will be 3 co-chairs on the US side, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Raimondo, and US Trade Representative Tai. And they had the chance, all of them, to meet at the summit last week. And then this political structure will set the direction, will steer the work of 10 specific working groups that have been mentioned, which will have the duty of translating this political steer into concrete deliverables. We have a very ambitious agenda. Some of the topics have been mentioned. We know not all issues will be easy, but I think the philosophy here is really to try to get as much as possible done. It's better to get 80% done than 100% not done, and to try to find, since the get-go, early short-term deliverables while keeping a long-term strategic view. I think that's the balance we need to find. And also, there will be, as I mentioned, some difficult issues which we still need to have this forum to discuss in a structured way. It will be primarily a bilateral forum, but it will also be a platform that will allow us to better coordinate to a wider set of like-minded partners in the digital economy and in multilateral fora. So in that sense, the mandate is a little bit broader than purely bilateral. If I could summarize the mandate, maybe there are 3 areas of work. First of all, and as Lisa has mentioned, we know we are in the context of systemic rivalry on digital governance. So there are a set of areas where we want to cooperate to make sure that we can develop a democratic system of governance that can deliver, and what policies we can take together to push back on practices that we have seen either against open markets or against fundamental values. And in that respect, things like export controls, FDI screening have been mentioned. That'll be, let's say, one first category. There's another category which is, I would say, more bilateral. And obviously, it's not enough to criticize models we don't like outside. We also have to do our own homework. And we have a lot of work to do in terms of regulation of the digital economy, both to keep markets open and contestable, but also to uphold fundamental rights online just as much as offline. And in that respect, I think the debate has shifted considerably in Washington, particularly. You will see quite a bit of convergence in the debate that you may have not seen a couple of years ago on things like questions around privacy, questions around online content moderation, how to deal with excessive market power, how to build ethical AI. These are questions which are happening, discussions that are happening also on the other side of the Atlantic, and you will find draft bills on almost all these issues in Congress at the moment. So I think the second aspect of the TTC of trying to find common approaches to these issues is a very important one. And a third category has to do with the fact that both sides, the EU and the United States, are now embarking on very ambitious industrial policies. And we want to boost our own capacities. We both want to boost innovation. So here, obviously, the question is whether we can compare notes, whether we can do this in a way that is complementary as possible, and whether we can build interdependent supply chains that are resilient and we can rely upon. Also in times of crisis. And this question is a difficult one. We have seen during the crisis and with the issues of vaccines that it's not so obvious. So here again, the TTC will play an important role. I'm happy to talk about more specifically some of the areas, but I thought it would be important to first frame it a little bit, how we see the TTC in general. We are now trying to translate these political goals into specific deliverables with a view to a first meeting of the TTC, hopefully on the other side of the summer. And we will, of course, be closely liaising with the Council of the European Parliament, as we always do. We have to be wary of repeating examples of the past that didn't work so well. We also have some successful examples of transatlantic fora, so let's try to learn from those things that worked and also from those that didn't work to get it right this time. So looking forward to very much to our discussion, to the ideas, and to continue engaging.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, indeed, for giving us a little bit of meat of what is in that Trade and Technology Council. I'm sure that Lisa would like to have a more concrete reaction of one of the questions that she raised before. And I very much encourage you to actually react to each other's statements, because it is all about exchange, and I'm really much looking forward to the discussion. I also want to remind our viewers that we are accepting questions from them. We already had one. So if you want to ask something to our speakers, make sure that you jump in. But before we jump into the conversation, we have a third speaker. He's Giovanni Campi, and he's the director of Transatlantic Business Council, and he was nodding very strongly to the statements by Alejandro, so I'm very much looking forward to hear his views.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. I hope you can hear me well. what can I add after Liesha and Alejandro? I mean, they covered a lot of things, but let me just say a few words from the industry perspective and from the transatlantic industry perspective, because I think this is relevant. As you know, the TABC represents companies that are either European or US, but that do business on both sides of the pond. So that are, you know, transatlantic in nature and with transatlantic interests in mind. I think the first point, and I obviously echo what has been said so far, is the TTC is great. I think the industry as a whole welcomes the development very much. I don't remember seeing other recent developments where you've seen the industry so united over the past 6 months in supporting the original EU proposal for a TTC and in welcoming the creation of the TTC a couple of weeks ago. I mean, we've done it as TABC, obviously, but we've seen horizontal organizations on both sides of the Atlantic. We've seen sector-specific organizations, obviously. So I think the development is great. As Alejandro mentioned, it kind of ends a period of 4 or 5 years where obviously we were at a very low point in political terms, but it was also very challenging and difficult for industry to actually channel messages, and especially joint common transatlantic messages across. So this is definitely, I think there is a sense of relief and hope, let's say, after the TTC announcement and its creation. So this is definitely very positive. I think what Alejandro just said is very promising. What we would not like to see, I think, as industry is the TTC as an empty shell. So something that is just, you know, being created on paper. I think there is, it's an institutional legal term, you know, it's a fairly loose forum per se, but I think, you know, we need to try to make the most, I think out of it. It is quite ambitious, and I agree with the previous speakers in terms of what has been proposed. You know, the creation of the 10 working groups, the creation of the parallel forum on competition issues. I mean, it's really, the agenda on paper is really quite ambitious. Obviously, so far we don't have details also around, let's say, working methods, around timing schedule, modus operandi. So we very much look forward to, you know, to know more in the coming period around this. Obviously, what we call for is for it to be operationalized as quickly as possible and as effectively as possible. And I heard Alejandro now mentioning, you know, first meeting of the TTC after summer, I think was mentioned. So that is definitely welcome, I think. Now on just taking a step back, I think there has been on the industry side, as I said, quite a bit of excitement around the TTC. Now, I would say let's not, the TTC is not the solution to all problems. It's a great first step. I think it's a great, you know, new beginning, if you like. There are a lot of open questions out there still in aluminum, around, you know, digital tax, around transatlantic data flows, and it was mentioned earlier. There are clearly possibly different approaches on a number of issues, from platform regulations to others. So, you know, and also the economic relationship, the trade relationship at large between the EU and the US is in legal and regulatory terms, not as developed as other trade relationships that the US, for example, with Canada or Japan or whatever, you know. A TTIP or something like it is for now, obviously, you know, of the agenda. It's not, I don't think there is appetite to revive that, but, you know, let's look at the TTC really not as a conclusion, as a rival point, but really as a starting point of a new, I think, of a new start. And last point, let me mention that obviously representing industry, I think I need to make a very strong call for as much as possible, I would say, industry involvement in the TTC going forward. I think you know, it's for the TTC to be successful, I think the industry involvement will be very important. If we look at the summit statement, there is not that much reference to industry involvement, but we've seen in the past that industry involvement has been, I think, very beneficial to other forums that we had a long time ago, the Transatlantic Economic Council, the EU-U.S. Energy Council, and others, which are actually still present, like the IPR working group and so on. So it's, I think I would really call for industry involvement. I think not only because obviously we're gonna, the TTC is gonna deal with issues that are key and close to industry heart, like trade, but also because we're gonna deal with, it's gonna deal with the world of tech and digital that is very much fast moving, let's say, and I think that a very close and regular engagement of industry with the TTC would be beneficial to officials on both sides. Let me stop here and happy to react to questions.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. You actually gave me the chance to bring a topic that I think is very important for this discussion. And it's indeed this question of, yes, we have addressed some of the disputes that are ongoing between the US and the EU, but there are still some issues that we need to resolve. And one of them is the question of tariffs on aluminum and steel. And I was wondering to what extent we can actually move forward into a more positive trade agenda when we still have some issues to be resolved, and to what extent this is something that could actually go in the opposite direction. So we progressed in the cooperation of trade and technology on the one side, so we push for a more positive agenda in the dispute that we have ongoing. So maybe Alejandro and Lizkia, you would like to react on this one?
Yes, thank you. And that's a great question. And I agree to some extent, but on the other hand, I also think that once you establish a good dialogue, and whether that is on tech or a different topic, and the conditions are good, and the atmosphere in these conversations is good, then I feel that that could also be a platform and a starting point to address, for example, these steel tariffs, because obviously those are hurting European businesses, and we are very firmly against them. But we've seen on the EU-U.S. summit that we can definitely also put tariffs aside, come to agreements on those. We came to an agreement on the Airbus-Boeing tariffs. So I think continuing a dialogue also helps us with confronting the more irritants. So it should not only be the sweet, it can also be a little bit of the sour, but when you have them both, I think you can really make steps forward.
Thank you for that. Indeed, we need a positive agenda to move into a better bilateral relation on all the matters. What do you think about this, Alejandro?
Well, my excuse to dodge your question about 232 is that I need to stay within portfolio, and this is something that my colleagues in Cabinet Dombrovskis would be better placed to answer. But in general, I obviously agree with what Lisa said. I mean, this is really about creating the forum to work through difficult issues and to create the trust we need, and that in itself is extremely important. To come back on some of the other points mentioned, I mean, we are obviously at a very early stage. This was launched last week. Before that, we had to first let the new US administration get up and running. Once we had the counterparts in place to really agree on the scope and the mandate of this. So now we need to translate that into concrete deliverables and timelines, etc. So I would ask for some patience. One thing I'm not worried about is that we'll be hearing a lot from industry on the TTC. I really have no doubts that that will be the case. That's the concrete modalities is obviously something else we need to think about. But we also need to make sure that we listen also to civil society, to NGOs and others that might not be so readily available to us, so to reach out to them proactively as well. So I think on that respect, we will be working on that as well.
Because we're lucky to have Giovanni with us here today, I wanted to ask you, what do you think in terms of priorities should be the main focus right now of the Trade and Technology Council from the perspective of the businesses?
Thank you, Beatriz. I mean, I don't know, as I said earlier, I mean, not knowing the details and the working methods and the modus operandi is difficult to imagine. I guess, you know, the setup of the working groups and then, you know, the work will go on in parallel. But definitely there are some issues that, for example, we had mentioned in our in a TBC letter that we sent to officials on both sides ahead of the summit. There are some issues that are possibly more pressing than others. For example, supply chain issues around semiconductors, for example. These are really issues that we should start dealing with yesterday, basically, because there is a crisis that is there. There are other issues that you know, where already both sides of the Atlantic are working on. Some Europe is more advanced in most of them, but for example, AI comes to mind as an area where I think, you know, work should get started, and the TDC is definitely a great forum for that. Then there are obviously issues where that are, I think, politically more difficult to address, platform governance, platform regulation, and so on. But I very much welcome, and I was heartened by what Alejandro mentioned earlier, which is, you know, and I completely agree, we should really look as much as possible for common approaches, if not common, at least coordinated, or at least, you know, the statement made it very clear that, you know, the two jurisdictions remain obviously free, you know, to regulate and legislate as they wish, obviously. But I think that really making an effort there to find at least common or similar approaches in key areas, it's going to be very, very, very important. Possibly the most important thing in the front of the TTC. I'll stop here, but I think I'm not seeing Beatriz moving.
I think she froze.
I think she froze.
I will respond then to what you said, Giovanni, because I couldn't agree with you more. I think working together in a coordinated approach also on AI would be really great. I think that the European Commission proposed a transatlantic AI agreement. Hey, Beatrice is back. Hi. And I don't think that these were in the conclusions when it came to the Tech Council, but I would, and perhaps the AI agreement would not be very formal, but keeping coordination and discussions on AI would be very important, because when we are regulating it in one way and the US will be regulating it in a different way, it will only be harder for businesses. And I think that, well, as I mentioned also in my introduction, to really look at it together from a democratic values point of view, and promoting it in that way would be a good way forward. So, but now, Beatrice, I'll give you the floor again.
Thank you so much. And sorry about those technological problems. Actually, I wanted to follow up on this issue, because we've been talking quite some time about the need for cooperation between the US and the EU. But when it comes to the digital revolution, when it comes to tech, when it comes to setting the standards, aren't we behind the other competitors in this area, like China, which is a very powerful competitor, and yet it doesn't definitely have the same values as the US and the EU. So I was wondering if we're not just trying to catch up on something, but we're very late to that. So I was wondering, to some extent, how can this Trade and Technology Council help? Because Alejandro, you were mentioning before that even though it's a bilateral forum, the idea is to actually open up to other like-minded partners, but also it would be a confrontation with some of those other countries that are setting their own standards that might not align with those.
Well, I'll start from the end. I mean, it is clear that AI is an area where we see a certain systemic rivalry when it comes to its use. Having said that, we need to work within the multilateral system. There are cases in point where we've been able to, as democracies, get together and push for the things that unite us. I mean, one example is, for instance, within the International Telecommunications Union and the proposal to change the internet protocol, where we worked also with industry, by the way, who are present in the standardization bodies to push back on something which would have basically turned the internet upside down, from decentralized to centralized, not in tune with our values of digital governance. So we should not simply think that we're going to create a closed club. It's about working together within the multilateral system as well, which we need itself to deliver. Whether we're falling behind, I think obviously boosting innovation is an important part of the TTC, and as I mentioned, we both have our initiatives and ongoing. So it will be important to compare notes and be complementary. I don't think that will be easy because there will be, of course, strong domestic pressures on both sides. But the bottom line is that the more complementary we are, the more critical mass you get. That's clear. The danger there, of course, is not to fall into this trap of in things like AI of opposing regulation or ethics and innovation. This is not what we're about. You are familiar with our proposals. This is a risk-based approach. This is about upholding fundamental principles, because that creates trust, and trust creates uptake, and then it will be easier to boost the innovation that we need if everyone is sure that the way this technology will be used is compatible with our models of society. So this is something that we should avoid. Sometimes there is this temptation to oppose the two, and I think the TTC should deal with both sides, obviously. I don't know if there will be an AI agreement, but I expect there will be a lot of agreement on AI. Because we do share important principles, and I think that's where we need to start. We need to start from the top with what unites us as democracies, based on the dignity and the integrity of the individual, and what that means for the way technology is used. You know that we have proposed to ban things like social scoring or mass surveillance in public spaces, with a few very, very tightly limited exceptions. So I think these are things we need to talk about, and then obviously the conversation can go into much more concrete technical standards of specific technological applications. So it is a broad spectrum, but as I said, we need to start by the low-hanging fruit and work from there, because success begets success.
Absolutely. You would like to react on this one, Leslie?
Yes, well, I agree with a lot that has been said, and I think that boosting innovation when it comes to well, lacking behind or being late to the party, I don't think so, but I think Giovanni perhaps could elaborate more on that. But I think that is very important, and obviously we need trust in order for the public to actually adopt, and for people and businesses to adopt AI and new technologies. But once we've built trust, and while building trust, we cannot forget that we really need to invest in these innovations. And I'm really glad that during the discussions in Europe and in Brussels, when it comes to getting out of this COVID crisis, we are talking about making everything more green, and but we also talk about digitalization, and digitalization also of SMEs. So they are also part of this growing economies, and I think a lot of innovation also comes from these SMEs, and they need to have the tools to be able to do that, the tools and the means, obviously. So I think that was a very important point. And I am obviously, as Alejandro said, we do share important principles, and that is really something that we can build on between the EU and the US. And I'm happy to hear that maybe no AI agreements, but agreements on AI is something that I can really underscribe. Thanks.
Thank you so much indeed. So Giovanni, do you think that we're lagging behind China? What are the main challenges that the European companies face, and could the Council on Trade and Technology help?
I think it's a difficult one. I don't think we are lagging behind necessarily. Clearly, if a joint dialogue and coordinated work between the EU and the US would have started some years ago on some of these areas, will it have been better? Yes. This is obvious. Now, the politics were what they were. I don't think we're necessarily lagging behind. I think the two keywords here were mentioned by both my fellow speakers here. One is to uphold democratic principles. I think that, for example, on AI that Alejandro was discussing, I think the approach from the European Commission is extremely clear. Now, to be seen whether that will be the approach shared and taken up by the other side of the Atlantic and so on. But I think that approach is very clear, and it's very powerful, if you want. The other keyword is critical mass, and which means I think we should restart looking at the EU and the US working together and taking a common approach on the global stage in issues like those, and how important and relevant the critical mass of the EU and the US acting together actually is. I think we have a little bit forgotten this principle over the past few years, but we are really, really, really strong politically, and as a follow-up to that, from a regulatory point of view, and so on and so forth. So, and industry is also stronger as a result of that. So I think we should look at these two elements.
Very positive messages coming out today. I'm very happy about that. So the question of China has actually been getting a lot of track in our Q&A chat. So I'm going to get back to those questions. One is coming from Robert Tobiasen, and he's saying that yesterday at the Atlantic Council virtual session, Brian Dize, Director for National Economic Council at the White House, talked about the five pillars of the 21st century industrial policy for the US. Two of those pillars concern public-private partnership. So TTC will likely include industry voices, and those voices are necessary. So the TTC fully understand things, indeed, as Giovanni was saying before. But many of these tech companies operate in China. So how will the TTC address the problem of pressure from China to disclose data and cybersecurity matters? Alejandro, would you like to answer this one?
Yes, of course, public-private partnerships is a huge part of our agenda, and also on this side of the Atlantic. When you look at everything we are trying to achieve in terms of our updated industrial policy, the number of EU-financed projects we are putting forward, both through the normal, let's say, MFF instruments such as the Digital Europe program, etc., Horizon Europe, but also what's coming now through the Recovery and Resilience Facility, where we have an incredible opportunity now to boost digitization in Europe. On the specific question of data and cybersecurity, these are two issues that will be part of the TTC. We have a specific working group on ICT security and competitiveness, where I expect the issue of how to deal with data security, how to deal with supply chain cybersecurity will come in strongly. But I think at this stage I cannot share more detail than that, but certainly it will be part of the agenda.
Thank you for that. Actually, I was thinking about another issue as well, because we've been talking about the role of China, but when it comes to tech companies, the US is very big. And one of the issues that we have been facing in Europe is that our companies are not strong enough to compete with US companies in this field. We have also seen a lot of work on the competition side in the cabinet of Executive Vice President Vestager on this side. So I was wondering to what extent do you think that the work that the Commission is doing to ensure a level playing field in Europe when it comes to these tech companies might affect the Trade and Technology Council, or it might be an opportunity to have a bilateral discussion with the US on these matters, seeing that we have a strong opposition in the US to all these measures that have been taken by the Commission so far?
I take it that one's also for me, but I'll be very interested to hear what my fellow speakers have to say. I think if you look at the first of all, the structures that we've agreed, because we have a TTC where platforms will be discussed, and we also have a parallel working group we are setting up on competition policy in the technology space. This is parallel for reasons of the statutory independence of some of the authorities that are involved. There you can see very clearly that there is a willingness to discuss this. And I think this willingness is also driven by the fact that the debate in the United States is very much converging with ours. If you look at some of the recent appointments, but also some of the bills that have been recently tabled in the House and that are now being starting to be discussed also in the Senate. Frankly, some of the things that they are proposing are very far-reaching for European standards even. So I think it is understood that there are issues that come with concentrated market power. And as the digital economy advances, these issues become even more prominent. And that has an effect on our respective competitiveness. And in that respect, I'm optimistic of the fact that we can have a discussion that is based on what the issues are and what the challenges are that we need to address, rather than on nationality of companies, because that is not the most productive way to have these discussions.
Absolutely. I was seeing Giovanni nodding very strongly, and so I'm sure that he has a reaction to this.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think in the end, I think that one of the most positive potential outcomes of the TTC in creating this structure and this dialogue and new cooperation and so on and so forth is actually to eliminate, if you want, that irritant or that kind of sense of mistrust or whatever that you have in the debate between the two sides on a number of issues. I think that eliminating that over time and not focusing, as Alejandro was saying, on the nationality or whatever of the companies, that would be fantastic. I think that would be fantastic. Now, in the real world, I do also understand that why sometimes, for example, from the US side, they might react not positively, let's say, with some of the legislative or regulatory developments in Europe and the direction of those, some that are on the table right now being debated. But managing over time again to eliminate that that suspicion, that sense of mistrust, that would be great, definitely.
Do you share this view, Leslie, on the question of how this Trade and Technology Council can actually help to resolve these issues?
Well, I think there will obviously what Alejandro said. I agree that the debates on in the US and the EU they converge now when it comes to the legislation concerning platforms, but in the end, we will not see eye to eye on everything. And the platforms, our legislation on platforms when it comes to the DSA and DMA that we are now discussing, it's not aimed against American companies per se, as Giovanni also said. It's just, these are the biggest platforms right now active in Europe, or some of the biggest platforms. So I think that we have to acknowledge that. And well, so this is why we are now trying to put rules in place. And I think it is really important that we have this discussion with the US, and perhaps we will not see eye to eye in the end. And, there will, I think that concerns every topic of the TC. I think it's very important that we have these dialogues, but, we will not, it will not always be the perfect solution for both sides. But as long as we try to, perhaps it's not always common, but sometimes coordinated, I think that would be already a huge step forward.
Absolutely. We have another question coming from the audience as well, by Bogdan Nicolai, who is an editor-in-chief in Defense and Security Monitor in Romania. And he's asking, now that he's waiting for the result of the recent summit to unfold, how about reaching the consensus among the member states before transatlantic pledge, to make sure that the transatlantic pledge is effective? Should we expect more divergent preferences within the EU because of the various bilateral and long history of commercial and political ties with Russia and China in particular? Maybe you would like to jump in, Lisa, now that you're here.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we see within the European Union, we see eye to eye on many issues, and I think, well, especially Russia is one that where we diverge sometimes, especially when it comes to East or Western Europe, and the histories that we have, and I think it is good. Well, I'm a liberal. I feel people should be entitled to their own opinion. But obviously, it's great that we could have a common point of view before engaging transatlantic. And I think that most of the time that we do this actually. So yeah. Especially because there's still, when it comes to foreign affairs, we still have a unanimity. So I guess that answers the question. I'm not sure if it was only on digital topics, if this was more on a foreign affairs topic, because then I think I answered the question.
They both interlinked in a way, right? Because the geopolitical aspect has an impact. We have seen it with the investment agreement with China, indeed, that these issues in the end, it interlinked with economy and trade, and they have an impact as well. But I think it's particularly relevant when we talk about China and we talk about Russia, especially considering all the cyber attacks and that the ways in which Russia has been trying to influence European politics. So obviously, when we try to come together and have a common position with the US, ensuring unity within the member states is absolutely essential. I don't know, how do you feel about this, Alejandro?
Absolutely, unity is crucial, and I hope we'll have some of that coming out of tonight's dinner. But look, I have a twofold reaction on that. First, it would be a mistake to think that the United States it's itself a monolith, and that there are no internal debates or division of opinions when it comes to how to deal with China or Russia. That would be a mistake. So it is only natural that on both sides debates take place in order to inform policy. But I don't think you let these debates block you from moving forward. That's the main point. And I think on China, we've had, I would say, since 2019 and the strategic outlook, a fairly solid approach that is supported by all member states. I think on Russia, we have 5 principles on what we fall back, and then we'll see what comes out of tonight. But I think we have more than enough sufficient base to work, especially in these topics, I should say. Thank God I'm not under unanimity rule in what I do. And in general, I do think that there is a commonality of view within the Council, that there is an absolute need for like-minded partners to work together on setting the rules for the digital economy. I've been already in a lot of meetings with member states. I've never heard anyone say that that should not be the case. Obviously, we will have to, as we go along, figure out where exactly to draw the line on different issues. But the direction of travel is consensual, and this summit statement has been obviously endorsed by all member states. That's why it's been approved and published. So we have a clear mandate.
We do indeed. We will see what happens tonight during the discussion. A lot of very interesting conversations happening at the European Council, but we're still here talking about our Trade and Technology Council itself. Giovanni, what do you think about this division within member states when it comes to these two countries and the challenges that we face on the technological side?
Thank you. Let me say a couple of things. One is, listen, we managed to get to have unity among member states in regarding Brexit. So I think we can have unity regarding pretty much everything we want, if we want to. Now, apart from this, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact, I think, that the EU has come quite a long way over the past few years as regards its approach to China, for example. Investment screening, trade defense instruments. So I think there has been progress there. Now, dissenting voices and unaligned interests are there. But I mean, as Alejandro said, obviously the statement is out there. The TTC is a fact. So unity is there from that perspective. Then obviously on specific issues and files, and again, as Liesje was saying, this is more foreign policy, so it's not really my cup of tea. But I think that, you know, there is always a way, I think, to overcome disagreements and approaches if we want to and work hard enough. And I think we had plenty of examples in the past few years that Europe can move. Maybe it takes a little while, but I think we are able to get there. And that's actually Europe's strength, I think, in a way, that the process is actually done that way. So that's my personal view.
Thank you so much, indeed, and let's hope that Europe will indeed move forward. Before we come to the end, because we're running out of time, but I would like to give the floor one last time to all of you to make a wish. Tell me, what do you expect from this Trade and Technology Council? What is it that you're aiming for, and what is it that you hope that it will achieve in the coming months, if not years? Maybe Liesje, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Only one. I have such a list. We are very ambitious in the European Parliament, to be honest. But I think one of the most important things come to mind is what we discussed a few times now, is the artificial intelligence and getting a coordinated, at least, but I hope a common approach on AI, because it will play a huge role in our lives in the years to come. And I really hope that when we legislate it, we can do it in a way that we are setting global standards. Thank you. And thank you for this debate today.
Thank you so much. A very important issue ahead in the coming years. Alejandro, what is your wish?
So I would go back to what I said at the beginning, that my wish would be that we are really able to find the right balance between having a TTC that is really strategic and focused on the big picture and what we need to achieve together, while at the same time very, very concrete and deliver in the short term. I think this is the balance we need to find, and my specific wish would be that despite the great success that TTC will have, I'll manage to keep a nice work-life balance for the next years.
That's a beautiful wish indeed. We all wish it for you as well. Giovanni, what is your wish for the business community in the relation with the trade and technology?
I'll make two wishes fast. No, I'll say, I mean, the first one is just, you know, relates to what I was saying earlier. Just, I very much hope that, you know, the way the TTC works and the discussions between officials and so on, I think there is I hope there is going to be a strong recognition that all these discussions need to be informed by, you know, real world developments, industry point of view, and so on and so forth. That's my first one. The second one is more long term, is I hope that in 3 years' time, let's say in 4 years' time, at the end of the next of this political cycle, let's say on both sides, we have so many positive outcomes out of the TTC that we can really consider that just the first step, and that has kind of prepared the ground for something even more, something incremental, that we have an incremental process going forward, let's say, in terms of dialogue and cooperation. That will be my long-term wish.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you to our speakers today, to all of them, for their very insightful and very interesting ideas, comments, and feedback on the Trade and Technology Council that was established very much recently, and all those wishes for the work ahead. I am sure Alejandro will talk with him to the cabinet. And now I'm going to hand over to Andre for a final word before we close the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Beatrice. Thank you very, very much. I couldn't have ended on a better note myself. I would have liked to be a genie to get all those wishes granted, but I hope that they will become reality with everybody's hard work. And what can we say? We hope that the future of the TTC will be a bright one for both sides of the Atlantic, and will bring a lot of benefits for everybody. So we're going to keep a close eye on the developments of this new prospect, of this new council. So thank you very much, everybody who participated. Liesha, Alejandro, Giovanni, thank you so much for joining us as speakers. Beatrice, great job as always moderating the session. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to leave you with 2 future events, which I want to quickly say. Of course, On the Agenda is coming back in 2 weeks, same time, same place. And on the 8th of July, we're going to look at deep fakes. So if anybody's interested in that, please keep an eye on the ELF website. And we're also going to organize our 2nd edition of Science Not Fiction, where we're trying to see how can we change fiction into reality. This time we're going to look at hardware, going from flying drones and flying helicopters to microchips to everything in between. And that's gonna come on the 15th of July. Everything is already on the ELF website. So if you want more information or if you want to register, please do so already. Keep an eye out for the recording of this event, and check out the social media and all the goodies that we have on the ELF website. Again, thank you very, very, very much. And my wish is that everybody has an amazing afternoon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.